Welcome, Senator Kaine. Welcome, Congressman Connolly. Welcome. We really appreciate you being here. This is a great opportunity for us to talk about the future and innovation. We also welcome you to the CIT building. This is an iconic building that people have seen so many times, and not everybody gets a chance to go in. It's a beautiful place. It's certainly got a long history. Part of that history is that the first president of CIT was Senator Kaine's father-in-law, former Governor Holton. And so there's been an awful lot of innovation, entrepreneurship, a lot of commercialization that has gone through over the time. And we're delighted to be able to host this today to talk about the future. So we've got a tremendous history, but we, the VIPC, are the successor to CIT. The Commonwealth has put significant investment into this organization to help grow innovation and entrepreneurship. We're delighted to be leading that effort in Virginia and delighted to be hosting this roundtable here today. So let me introduce Senator Tim Kaine.
Great, thank you. Hey, good morning, everyone. What a treat to be together with you. I'm going to acknowledge Senator Warner, who is here in absentia through a great staffer. He's doing an Intel-related visit today. And I want to just acknowledge my great friend, Jerry Connolly. Jerry has been very involved in this innovation work right here in a couple different chapters as chairman of the board of Fairfax County and now in Congress as a real leader. And so it's great to be here together. And we're so glad to have Secretary Yellen here. I still think about these issues like I was mayor of Richmond and governor of Virginia. I'm still very focused on the pride that I have in Virginia's economy. There's nothing we're doing where we can't do better. So no complacency, no resting on our laurels. But when I was governor from 2006 to 2010, we were named Best State for Business in America every year by Forbes magazine, multiple times by CNBC, and that has continued. It's continued under governors of both parties, under legislatures of both parties, and there's a lot of reasons for it, but at the end of the day, it's really about people. It's about people. It's about the pipeline of training, attracting, encouraging, rewarding, celebrating, incentivizing talent, and that's what Virginia has, and as long as we remain committed to it, we can be just very, very confident in a very bright future here. We're interested in this roundtable today because we have great innovators and entrepreneurs who are joining us. And in particular, I know Jerry and I, and Secretary, we want to talk to you about this. We are really proud of the work that Congress has done in the last 18 months, particularly on three major pieces of legislation, two of which were bipartisan, to advance our economic competitiveness. The infrastructure bill, the biggest investment in infrastructure that we've made in this country probably since the Eisenhower administration, and that bill contains a tremendous advance on innovations, particularly in the clean energy economy, as well as traditional infrastructure, which is so necessary. And nobody knows that better than the chairman of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors about how important transportation investments are. Secondly, the CHIPS and R&D Act, which has America kind of grabbing on again to a market leadership position in chips manufacturing, including here in Virginia. We're close to the Micron facility in Manassas. But the bill also included a lot of additional incentives and strategies for grabbing leadership in R&D. And then finally in the Inflation Reduction Act, and particularly in that bill, while it deals with a number of important healthcare issues, the real exciting thing about the bill for me is the clean energy pieces. Virginia was a laggard in clean energy. Even up to 5 or 10 years ago, we were not at the front end of being innovators. We were in need of it because Hampton Roads is the second most vulnerable community in the United States to sea level rise, and Appalachia has extreme flooding. So we were kind of everyday victims of a changing climate, but we weren't on the front end of investing in low and no carbon energy. Well, the tax incentives and other strategies in the Inflation Reduction Act are already, together with other initiatives in the Commonwealth, positioning us where we have rocketed from bottom 10 in solar deployment to top 10, and we're now positioned to lead the United States in offshore wind. There's many other things we can do, but at least we've gone from sort of back of the pack to proudly trying to be leaders in clean energy. We're going to talk about all of that today. I'm thrilled to introduce Secretary Yellen, who just told me that her current job is even harder than her last one, which I have a hard time believing. When you're chairman of the Fed, every word you say will cause the market to go up or down. But and I'm sure she'll explain this, when you're Secretary of the Treasury, the breadth of responsibility is really astounding. So economic policy, sure, but Treasury, for example, I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee, and Jerry was a staffer in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, is now on Foreign Relations on the House side, all of sanctions policy. How do we sanction bad behavior around the world? All of that comes through Treasury. So it is an incredibly broad portfolio. I know Jerry and I are just thrilled to have Secretary Yellen here today to hear from some of Virginia's best, take some ideas, but also share ideas with us. So now let me introduce Secretary Janet Yellen.
Thanks so much. Well, it's great to be here at Virginia Innovation Partnership Corporation, and my thanks to Bob and his team for hosting us today. Thank you also to Senator Kaine, Congressman Connolly. Appreciate you joining me here, and thank you both for your leadership and your tireless work to pass those 3 acts, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And I'm grateful that leaders from Virginia's higher education, business, and innovation communities are here today as well. And I'm looking forward to our discussion concerning innovation in the administration's economic plan and American leadership in science and technology. Well, earlier this year, I laid out a case for what I call a modern supply-side expansion of our economy. I described how a country's long-term growth potential depends, among other things, on its labor supply and the productivity of its workers. Yet, for decades, our potential has been weighed down by declining labor force participation and sluggish productivity growth. Now, with an economy at full employment, I would argue that now is the right time for a supply-side expansion that increases our productive capacity and also reduces inequality. Our agenda includes concerted investments in our physical capital, our human capital, and science and technology. So less than a year later, I'm happy to report that the Biden administration has enacted key elements of the modern supply-side agenda. And today, I'm thrilled to speak about one of the major drivers of our supply expansion, which is the administration's investments in innovation and technology. The United States is the global leader in innovation, but over the past few decades, our leadership has increasingly come under threat from competitors like China. Now, frankly, much of this was of our own making. We'd failed to make adequate investments in science and technology. Federal R&D as a percent of GDP had dropped to 1/3 of 1960 levels. Our patchwork of clean energy incentives, frankly, fell far short of what was needed to meet our climate goals. And the global share of semiconductors manufactured in the United States had fallen from 37% to just over 12% over the past 3 decades. Our government's failure to invest in innovation has had wide-ranging impacts on our long-term economic well-being. I would say at the most fundamental level, it impacted our productive capacity, which I think of as the ceiling on what our economy can produce. Over the past year, the Biden administration has begun to reverse that trend. We've advanced an economic plan that finally puts innovation and technology at the forefront of our national agenda, and we're making sure that the benefits are broadly felt in communities across the country. Our administration is investing in digital infrastructure. We're boosting R&D funding in key areas. We're mobilizing capital toward 2 foundational 21st century sectors, namely semiconductors and clean energy. And together, our efforts are raising our economy's aggregate production capacity, and in turn, we're raising America's long-term economic outlook. So let me be more specific and speak about three major laws that are powering that economic plan. First, let's start with the bipartisan infrastructure law. The law is an historic effort to modernize our physical infrastructure, roads, bridges, trains, ports. But it's also the largest ever investment in our digital infrastructure. And in today's economy, high-speed internet is not just a luxury, it's a necessity. Our plan invests $65 billion to expand access to broadband and reduce internet bills for millions of Americans, including up to 1 million households here in Virginia. We expect this investment to have a meaningful impact on productivity. The law also deploys technology to modernize America's transportation system. As an example, the Department of Transportation's SMART grants are funding pilot programs of smart city technologies by state and local governments. If successful, these projects could be replicated by other communities across the country. And the goal is not to simply repair infrastructure, it's to upgrade it with innovations that can reap significant efficiencies. Second, we're building a semiconductor ecosystem here at home. Semiconductors, as you know, are essential inputs to virtually all modern digital technologies, from washing machines to military equipment. The CHIPS Act will ensure the growth of the full microelectronics supply chain in the United States. From R&D, incentives are already inducing waves of private investment from companies like IBM and Micron. Critically, we're also investing in the human capital needed to fill the coming demand for trained workers in the semiconductor industry. The Commerce Department is establishing a center to convene industry, universities, and governments to build the semiconductor talent pipeline that is really critical to boosting our productive capacity. Our efforts will bolster the work of existing training programs, including those in Virginia's colleges and universities. And third, we're making our nation's largest investments in clean energy. For years, our government had provided incentives for the development of the clean energy sector, but the existing system was just insufficient, with little support for new technologies that could help transition harder to abate sectors. But the Inflation Reduction Act changes that. Our expanded business tax credits are expected to jumpstart innovation and growth in emerging sectors like clean hydrogen and carbon capture. They're also expected to accelerate progress on more established clean technologies like solar. We've already mobilized significant private investment. Since the start of our administration, companies have announced more than $100 billion in EV and battery manufacturing investments here at home. And there's been a surge in the 2 months since the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. And the benefits of these investments aren't simply limited to their effect on the economy's aggregate production potential. We expect our supply-side agenda to broaden economic opportunity across America as well. For years now, many cities and towns in our country have experienced a painful industrial decline. Our plan delivers on our commitment to focus on areas that have been long overlooked. Battery and chip plants, like the ones here in Virginia, they're being announced all across the country, including in regions like the Midwest. We expect that this plan will also deliver good jobs across socioeconomic backgrounds. One analysis shows that nearly half of the jobs in the semiconductor industry do not require a bachelor's or graduate degree. Building domestic manufacturing in critical sectors also strengthens our economic resilience and our national security. Take semiconductors. Everyday consumer goods, advanced technologies, and defense systems all rely on its steady supply. Yet we produce only a fraction of all semiconductors, manufacturing advanced ones. Home will have a chip shortage, and we know the importance of doing so because, according to one estimate, the shortage in 2021 shaved off about 1 full percentage point off U.S. GDP. Well, let me say I'm proud that our administration has put science and technology back in its rightful place, even as more work needs to be done. See some of the impacts of the plan immediately. Other impacts, particularly in research and development, will take years to pass through to top-line economic numbers. But together, I believe that these laws constitute among the most meaningful investments we have ever made in economic strength. And they position America to lead the global economy in the decades to come. Our economic plan invests in the future, but in a way, we're finding our roots again. For all that economists try to do to assess a country's economic strength, it really remains difficult to quantify the intangible effect of a country's culture and its dynamism. And America is a country of builders and pioneers. And this spirit has driven much of our success as a country. And I'm proud that we're renewing that tradition with the economic plan we've enacted this year. So thank you so much for hosting me today.
Thank you, Secretary.